It was one of those perfect fall evenings back in October of 2018, the kind that tricks you into thinking the world is all cozy and harmless. The leaves were turning that fiery mix of red and orange, crunching under my boots as I walked the old trail behind my grandparents' farm in upstate New York. I'd come out there to clear my head. Work had been grinding me down, and I needed a break from the city noise. Little did I know that hike would turn into the most terrifying night of my life, something I still can't explain without feeling that chill creep up my spine. My name's Alex, and at the time I was 28, single, and pretty much glued to my laptop for a living. My grandparents had passed a few years earlier, but they left me the property, a rambling old farmhouse on about 50 acres of woods and fields. It was isolated, sure, but that's what I loved about it. No neighbors for miles, just the rustle of wind through the trees and the occasional hoot of an owl. That fall, the foliage was at its peak, drawing tourists to the area, but out on the farm, it felt like my own private world. I arrived around noon, unpacked my bag, and decided to take advantage of the daylight for a long walk. The trail looped through the woods, past a dried-up creek bed and up to a ridge with a killer view of the valley. I'd done it 100 times as a kid, but this time I packed a thermos of coffee and my phone for some photos. The air had that sharp apple cider bite to it, and the sun filtered through the branches like golden shards. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. But as I got deeper into the woods, maybe a mile in, I noticed something off. The leaves weren't just crunching, they were shifting, like something was moving just out of sight, paralleling my path. I stopped, listened. Nothing but the wind. I shook it off as squirrels or deer. Fall always brings out the wildlife scrambling for food before winter hits. But then I saw it. A footprint in the mud by the trail. Not a boot print like mine, but bare, human-shaped, with toes splayed wide like it had been running. Fresh, too. The edges weren't dried out. My heart picked up a bit. Who'd be out here barefoot in 50-degree weather? Hunters? Kids messing around? I called out, "Hello, anyone there?" My voice echoed back, swallowed by the trees. No answer. I kept going, but now I was glancing over my shoulder every few steps. The trail narrowed, and the canopy got thicker, blocking more light. That's when I smelled it. Smoke, faint but acrid, like a campfire that had been doused wrong. Up ahead through the branches, I spotted a clearing I didn't remember. Curiosity got the better of me. I veered off the path, pushing through some underbrush. What I found made my stomach drop. There was a makeshift camp, a tattered tent slumped against a tree, a ring of stones with charred wood inside, and scattered belongings. Empty cans, a ripped sleeping bag, even a kid's stuffed animal, all weathered like it had been there for weeks. But the weird part, it looked abandoned, yet fresh footprints circled the site, the same bare ones I'd seen earlier. And in the dirt, someone had scratched words. "It watches from the leaves." I froze, reading it over and over. What the hell? Vagrants? Some cult thing? I pulled out my phone to snap a picture, but the battery was dying faster than it should, down to 20% already, even though I'd charged it in the car. The sun was dipping lower, painting everything in that eerie twilight glow. I should have turned back right then, but I heard a rustle. Definite this time. Not the wind. Branches snapping, like something heavy moving through the brush. I spun around, scanning the trees. Nothing. Then, from the corner of my eye, a shape. Tall, hunched, blending with the trunks. It was gone. When I looked straight on, my pulse hammered in my ears. "This is stupid," I muttered to myself, trying to play it cool. "Probably just a bear or something." But bears don't leave barefoot prints or scratch warnings in the dirt. I backed away from the camp, heading back to the trail at a brisk walk. The woods felt different now, alive in a way that made my skin crawl. Every falling leaf sounded like footsteps. I tripped over a root, scraping my knee, and when I looked up, there was another message carved into a tree trunk. Don't look up. My breath caught. Who carves that? And how fresh was it? The bark was still oozing sap. I started jogging, phone in hand, flashlight app ready, even though there was still some light. By the time I made it back to the farmhouse, the sky was bruised purple, and a cold front was rolling in, whipping the leaves into little whirlwinds. I locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and tried to laugh it off over a microwave dinner. But that smell, the smoke, followed me inside, faint but persistent, maybe from my clothes. I showered, changed, but it lingered. Night fell hard out there, no streetlights, just the moon peeking through clouds. I sat in the living room, scrolling my phone for signal. It was spotty at best. That's when the power flickered. Once, twice, then out, pitch black. I fumbled for my phone's light, heart racing again. The house creaked in the wind, old timbers groaning like they were alive. I told myself it was just a storm coming, but then I heard it, scratching, slow, deliberate, like nails on wood coming from the back door. I froze on the couch, listening. It stopped, then started again, closer to the window. I crept over, phone shaking in my hand, and peeked through the curtains. Nothing but swirling leaves. But as I turned away, a face, pale, smeared with dirt, flashed in the glass, eyes wide and unblinking, staring right back at me. I yelped, dropped the phone and scrambled back. When I grabbed it and shone the light outside, it was gone. Just the empty porch, a few scattered leaves. Was it a reflection? My own face distorted? No, those eyes weren't mine. They were hollow, desperate. The power came back on with a hum, lights buzzing to life. I didn't sleep that night. I barricaded the doors with chairs, kept every light blazing, and sat with a fireplace poker in my lap. Around 2 a.m., the scratching returned, this time from upstairs, like something in the attic. The farmhouse had an old pull-down ladder to the attic space. My grandparents stored Christmas stuff up there. I hadn't been up in years. The sound was rhythmic. Scratch, pause, scratch, like it was trying to get through the floor. I couldn't take it. I grabbed a flashlight and yanked the ladder down, climbing up with the poker raised. The attic was dusty, cobwebs everywhere, boxes stacked high. The scratching stopped as soon as my head poked through. I swept the beam around. Nothing. But in the far corner, behind a pile of old quilts, I found it. A nest. Twigs, leaves, scraps of cloth woven together, big enough for a person. And in the middle, that same stuffed animal from the camp, stained with what looked like dried blood, scratched into the floorboards. It's here now. I bolted down, slammed the ladder up and called the cops. No signal. The landline was dead, wires probably chewed by squirrels or worse. I spent the rest of the night in the kitchen, back to the wall, watching the doors. Dawn broke grey and misty, and with it, the sound stopped. I packed my bag and drove straight to town, reported everything to the sheriff. They sent a deputy out later that day, found the camp in the woods, the carvings, even the attic nest, but no one there. Tracks led off into the deeper forest, then vanished. The deputy said it was probably a homeless guy, maybe on drugs, squatting on the property. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. They ran checks on missing persons. Turns out, a hiker had gone missing in those woods the previous fall. A young woman, barefoot when last seen, fleeing what witnesses called something in the trees. Her description matched the face I'd seen in the window. Pale, dirt-smeared, eyes like voids. I sold the farm 6 months later. Never went back. But every October when the leaves start falling, I smell that smoke again, faint in my apartment. And sometimes, Late at night, I hear scratching at the window. I don't look. Because whatever it is, it's still watching from the leaves. If you're out in the woods this fall, enjoying the colours, be careful what follows you home. It was late October 2020, and the small town of Black Hollow, Vermont, was drowning in fall colours, crimson, gold, and amber leaves blanketing the hills like a painting. I'd always loved this time of year, the crisp air, the smell of wood smoke, the way the world feels alive yet fading all at once. But that weekend, a camping trip with my buddies turned into something I'll never forget. Something that makes me question what I saw, what I felt out there in the woods. If you're planning a fall getaway, listen close. This is the kind of story that might make you rethink those cozy campfire nights. My name's Ethan, and back then I was 25, working construction and living for the weekends. My friends, Jake, Matt and Sarah, had been planning this camping trip for weeks. Black Hollow was about an hour's drive from our hometown, a quiet spot known for its hiking trails and a lake that glowed like glass under the autumn sun. We weren't hardcore outdoorsy types, just looking for a cheap escape to drink some beers, roast marshmallows and unplug. We packed Jake's old SUV with tents, sleeping bags and a cooler, laughing about how we'd tell ghost stories and scare Sarah, who always pretended she wasn't spooked. We got to the campsite Friday afternoon, a clearing off a dirt road near Lake Hallow. It was perfect. Flat ground, a fire pit, and a view of the water through the trees. The forest was dense, though, with pines and maples crowding in, their branches knitting together overhead. As we set up, I noticed how quiet it was. No birds, no squirrels, just the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Matt joked it was too peaceful, but I brushed it off. We were here to relax, not overthink. It was night, and we had a fire going. The flames made shadows that moved across the trees. We were on our second round of drinks, passing a bag of chips, when Sarah pointed toward the lake. "Look at that," she said quietly. Across the water, maybe 200 yards away, a small light flickered. It looked like a lantern floating in the dark. At first we thought it was another campsite, but the light moved strangely. It stopped, then zipped side to side, too fast, too odd. Jake laughed. "Probably kids with a drone." Sarah didn't laugh. Neither did I. The light blinked out, and we went back to our stories, though the mood felt heavier. Around 11 p.m. we heard it, a low, guttural sound from the woods, like a moan carried on the wind. We froze, straining to listen. It came again, closer, but muffled, like it was underground or far off. Matt grabbed a flashlight and swept it over the trees. Nothing. "Coyote, maybe?" he said, but his voice wavered. Coyotes don't moan like that. We decided to call it a night, doused the fire, and zipped into our tents. I shared one with Jake. Sarah and Matt had the other. I couldn't sleep. The air was cold, but it wasn't just that. It was the feeling of being watched, like eyes were boring into the tent. Around 2 a.m., I heard twigs snapping outside, slow and deliberate, circling the campsite. I nudged Jake awake. "You hear that?" I whispered. He nodded, eyes wide. We sat up, listening as the steps got closer, then stopped right outside our tent. I held my breath, clutching the pocket knife I kept in my bag. Then a sound, like someone dragging their nails down the nylon. Slow, intentional. Jake grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. We didn't move, didn't speak. After what felt like forever, the sound stopped, and the footsteps faded toward the lake. I unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. The fire pit was smouldering, even though we'd doused it hours ago. And in the dirt, leading from our tent to the water's edge, were tracks. Not boots, not paws, but long claw-like marks, like something had dragged itself across the ground. I zipped the tent back up, heart pounding, and told Jake we were leaving at first light. Morning came, grey and foggy, the lake hidden in mist. We packed up fast, barely talking. Sarah looked pale, said she'd heard whispering outside their tent all night, words she couldn't make out. Matt admitted he'd seen the light again, closer this time, hovering just beyond the trees. As we loaded the SUV, I noticed something carved into a nearby tree, fresh enough that the wood was still pale. "Stay out." My stomach twisted. We hadn't seen it yesterday. No one mentioned it. We just got in the car and peeled out. Halfway back to town, Jake slammed on the brakes. There, in the middle of the dirt road, was a pile of our camping gear, stuff we'd packed in the SUV. My sleeping bag, Sarah's backpack, even the cooler, all arranged in a neat circle. We hadn't stopped. No one could have taken it without us noticing. Matt got out to check, but Sarah screamed at him to get back in. "Drive, Jake, just drive!" she yelled. He did, flooring it past the pile, tires kicking up dust. We made it to a diner in town, shaken but trying to laugh it off over coffee. The waitress, an older woman with a kind face, overheard us talking and went still. "You were at Lake Hallow?" she asked, her voice low. We nodded. She leaned in, glancing around like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "Folks don't camp there anymore. Not after '97. She told us about a group of college kids who'd gone missing at that lake 23 years ago. 5 of them, vanished without a trace. Search parties found their tents torn open, claw marks on the trees, and a single photo in one of their cameras. A blurry shot of something tall, hunched, with glowing eyes, standing at the water's edge. We didn't know what to say. The waitress added, "Locals say the lake's cursed. Something lives out there, something that doesn't like visitors." She paused, then whispered, "It follows you if you stay too long." We paid and left, barely speaking the whole drive home. I thought that was the end of it, just a creepy story to tell at bars. But a week later, I found something in my jacket pocket, a small, smooth stone, like the ones from the lake's shore. I hadn't put it there. That night, I woke up to the smell of smoke, faint but unmistakable, like a campfire burning nearby. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, no balcony, no way for that smell to be there. I checked every room. Nothing. But when I looked out my window, I saw it. A light, flickering in the parking lot below, darting side to side, just like at the lake. I closed the curtains and didn't sleep. The next morning my car had long, claw-like scratches down the hood, deep enough to tear the paint. I haven't been back to Black Hollow. None of us have. But every fall, when the leaves turn, I hear it. Faint whispers outside my window, like they're trying to tell me something. And sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I see that light, bobbing in the dark. If you're thinking of camping this fall, pick a spot with lots of people around. Because whatever's out there in the woods, it's still hungry. Third story. The fall of 2019 was supposed to be a fresh start for me. I'd just moved to a small town in rural Ohio, chasing a quieter life after a rough breakup and a dead-end job. The town, called Embers Mill, was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and the streets were lined with old maples that turned blood red every October. I rented a little cabin on the edge of town, right where the woods began, thinking it'd be perfect for some peace and quiet. But one night, during a late fall storm, I learned something about those woods, something that still makes me check my locks every night. My name's Riley, and I was 30 at the time, starting over as a freelance graphic designer. The cabin was cozy, tucked into a clearing with a gravel driveway and a view of the forest that stretched for miles. It was mid-October, and the leaves were falling like crazy, piling up against the porch. I loved the vibe at first, the way the wind howled through the trees, the smell of damp earth, the way the world felt alive in that crisp autumn way. But that night, October 27th. Everything changed. It started with the storm. The forecast had warned about heavy rain, but this was something else. Sheets of water hammering the roof, thunder so loud it rattled the windows. I was alone, sipping tea and working on my laptop, when the power cut out around 9 p.m. The cabin went dark, just the glow of my screen and the occasional flash of lightning. I wasn't too worried. I had candles and a flashlight, and outages were common out here. But then I heard it over the rain. A knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate thumps. I froze, my tea going cold in my hands. Who'd be out in this weather miles from town? I waited, thinking maybe it was a branch hitting the porch. But it came again, louder, like someone was pounding with their fist. I grabbed the flashlight and crept to the window, peering through the blinds. The porch was empty, just leaves swirling in the wind. No car in the driveway, no footprints in the mud. My heart was racing, but I told myself it was nothing, just the storm playing tricks. I locked the deadbolt and sat back down, trying to focus on my laptop. That's when I noticed something weird. The battery was draining fast, down to 15%, even though I'd charged it that morning. Then the screen flickered, and for a split second I swear I saw a face in the reflection. Not mine, but pale, with dark, sunken eyes, staring over my shoulder. I spun around, shining the flashlight. Nothing but the empty living room, the candles flickering on the coffee table. My pulse was hammering now. The knocking came again, this time from the back door. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my hands shaking. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. No answer, just the rain and another round of thunder. I checked every window, every lock, but saw nothing outside. Then, as I passed the fireplace, I noticed the smell. Rotten, like wet leaves mixed with something dead. It wasn't there before. I followed it to the chimney, where the flue was open. I slammed it shut, but not before something small fell out. A single leaf, black and shriveled, like it had been burned but somehow stayed whole. I tried to call 911, but my phone had no signal, even though I usually got a bar or two. The storm was getting worse, the wind screaming like it was alive. That's when I heard the footsteps, heavy, uneven, coming from the roof. Thump, 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 like someone was pacing up there, dragging something behind them. I stood in the middle of the living room, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, staring at the ceiling. The steps stopped right above me, and then silence. Too silent. Even the rain seemed to hush for a moment. Then a whisper. Not from outside, but inside, right behind my ear. "You shouldn't be here." I whipped around, swinging the flashlight. Nothing. The candles flickered like something had moved through the room, but I was alone, or so I thought. My laptop, still open on the table, was now showing a blank screen. No design program, no low battery warning, just black. And in the reflection, those same eyes, closer now, like whatever it was, stood right behind me. I ran to the front door, ready to make a break for my car, storm or not, but when I opened it, I froze. The porch was covered in leaves, not scattered, but arranged in a spiral that led from the door straight into the woods. In the center of that spiral was the same dark leaf, shining with rain. Then lightning flashed. For just a moment, I saw it. A tall, thin figure standing near the trees, its head tilted to the side like it was watching me. Its eyes caught the flash of light, glowing softly, like fading embers. I slammed the door, locked it, and pushed the couch against it. The footsteps started again, circling the cabin now, slow and deliberate, like whatever was out there was toying with me. I hid in the bathroom, the only room without windows, and sat on the floor, knife in hand, listening. The whispers came back, not words I could understand, but low and guttural, seeping through the walls. My flashlight died, even with fresh batteries. The candles in the living room went out one by one. I heard the soft pfft of each flame. Around 3 a.m. the storm quieted, and so did the noises. I didn't move until dawn, when the first grey light crept through the cracks. I checked the cabin. Nothing out of place, except the leaves. They were gone from the porch, like they'd never been there. My laptop was back to normal. Battery dead, but no creepy reflection. The chimney flue was open again, though I swore I'd locked it. And on the fireplace mantel, that black leaf sat, untouched. I packed my stuff and drove to town, shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. At the local diner, I told the story to an old guy at the counter, hoping for some rational explanation. His face went pale. "You're at the old Miller cabin, ain't you?" he said. I nodded. He leaned in, voice low. "Folks don't stay there long. Back in the 80s, a family lived there. One night a fire started. Nobody knows how. They found the parents, but their kid, gone. Just a pile of black leaves where she'd been sleeping." He paused, looking me dead in the eye. "People say she's still out there in the woods, looking for a way back, and she don't like company." I didn't go back to the cabin. I broke my lease, moved to a city apartment, and tried to forget. But every fall, when the leaves start piling up, I find one. Black, shriveled, on my doorstep or in my car. And at night, when the wind picks up, I hear it. A whisper, just behind my ear. "You shouldn't be here." If you're thinking of renting a quiet place this fall, check the history first. Some things don't let go. Fourth story. It was October 2022, and the air in rural Maine had that perfect fall chill, the kind that makes you pull your jacket tight and crave a warm fire. I'd driven up to my uncle's old hunting cabin for a weekend alone, needing a break from the grind of my desk job. The place was nestled deep in the woods, miles from any town, surrounded by pines and maples that blazed orange and red under the autumn sun. It was supposed to be a quiet retreat, a chance to recharge. Instead, it became the kind of nightmare that still makes me jump at every rustling leaf. My name's Connor, and I was 27 at the time, just a regular guy trying to keep it together. My uncle had passed a year earlier, leaving me the cabin, a rickety thing with creaky floors and no cell service, but it had charm. I'd been there as a kid, fishing in the nearby creek, listening to my uncle's stories about the woods. He'd always warned me not to wander too far after dark, saying the forest changes at night. I thought he was just messing with me. That weekend, I found out he wasn't. I got to the cabin around noon on a Friday, the leaves crunching under my tires as I pulled up the dirt road. The place looked the same. Weathered logs, a sagging porch, and a stone chimney puffing smoke when I got a fire going. The woods were gorgeous, sunlight filtering through the branches, casting long shadows that danced on the ground. I unpacked my gear, some food, a book, a flashlight, and planned to hike to the creek, maybe take some photos of the foliage. But as I stepped outside, I noticed something odd. A faint trail of ash on the porch steps, like someone had spilled charcoal dust. I swept it away, figuring it was from the chimney, but it left a smear, black and gritty. The hike to the creek was uneventful, just the sound of leaves falling and the gurgle of water. But on the way back, maybe an hour later, I felt it. A prickle on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I stopped scanning the trees. Nothing but shadows and the occasional squirrel. Then I saw it. A handprint on a tree trunk, pressed into the bark like it had been burned there, the edges still smouldering faintly. It wasn't there on my way out. My heart kicked up a gear, but I told myself it was a prank, maybe kids from a nearby camp. I snapped a quick photo with my phone and kept moving, faster now. Back at the cabin, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky a bruised purple. I locked the door, started dinner, and tried to shake the unease. That's when I heard the first sound, a low scraping noise, like something dragging across the gravel outside. I grabbed my flashlight and peeked through the window. The driveway was empty, but the ash was back on the porch, thicker now, forming a jagged line toward the woods. I checked my phone to call someone, anyone, but the battery was at 5%. Impossible, since I'd barely used it. The photo of the handprint was gone, replaced by a blurry image of the cabin's porch, taken from outside, like someone else had used my phone. My stomach dropped. I hadn't taken that picture. I double-checked the locks, grabbed a hunting knife from my uncle's old gear, and sat by the fire, listening. The scraping came again, closer, circling the cabin. Then a voice, soft, raspy, like it was coming from the walls themselves. "Open the door." I froze, knife trembling in my hand. It wasn't a request. It was a demand, cold and hollow. I shouted, "Get out of here! I've got a weapon!" No response, just silence, thick and heavy. The fire flickered, and I noticed the smell. Acrid, like burning hair, mixed with that same ashy scent from the porch. I checked the chimney, thinking something was stuck, but it was clear. That's when I saw it. A shadow moving across the living room wall, tall and distorted, with limbs too long for a person. It wasn't cast by anything I could see. No light source, no object. It stretched, then vanished, like it sank into the wall. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I'd pass out. I didn't sleep. I sat up all night, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, watching the windows. Around 3 a.m. the scraping stopped, but something worse started. A tapping, slow and rhythmic, coming from the attic. The cabin had a trapdoor to a small crawl space. My uncle used it for storage. I hadn't checked it when I arrived. Why would I? The tapping grew louder, like someone knocking from the inside, wanting out. I couldn't ignore it. I grabbed a chair, climbed up, and pulled the trapdoor open, shining the flashlight inside. The beam caught dust motes, old boxes, and something else. A pile of ash, heaped in the corner, shaped vaguely like a person curled up, scratched into the floorboards next to it. "It burns here." My breath caught, and the flashlight flickered out. In the dark I heard it, a whisper from the attic, the same raspy voice. "You let it in?" I slammed the trapdoor shut, nearly falling off the chair, and barricaded it with a bookshelf. At dawn, the sound stopped. The cabin felt normal again, the ash on the porch gone, the air clean. I packed my bag and drove to town, shaking the whole way. At a gas station, I told the story to the clerk, an older guy with a weathered face. He didn't laugh. "You're at the old Tate cabin, right?" he said. I nodded. He leaned in, voice low. "Back in '94, a hunter went missing up there. They found his gear, but no body. Just ash, scattered in the woods. Folks say he messed with something old, something tied to the land. It don't like being disturbed." He paused, eyeing me. "You see any ash?" I felt sick. I didn't tell him about the handprint, the voice, or the attic. I just left, moved back to the city, and swore off cabins. But every fall, when the leaves turn, I find it. Traces of ash on my doorstep, in my car, even in my apartment. And sometimes, at night, I hear that scraping, faint but close, like it's waiting for me to open the door again. If you're heading to the woods this fall, watch for the signs. Some things don't stay buried. Story. The fall of 2023 was one of those seasons that felt like it was made for postcards. Golden leaves, crisp air, and that smoky scent of bonfires drifting through the air. I decided to spend a weekend at my family's old property in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, a place we hadn't visited since I was a kid. It was just a small cabin, tucked into a valley where the trees grew so thick they seemed to swallow the sunlight. I was looking forward to unplugging, maybe hiking a bit and soaking in the autumn vibes. But what happened that weekend turned those woods into a place I'll never set foot in again. My name's Lucas, and I was 29 at the time, working as a mechanic and itching for a break from the shop's grease and noise. The cabin was a 6-hour drive from my apartment, and I got there late Friday afternoon, October 20th. The place was just as I remembered. Weathered wood, a tin roof, and a porch overlooking a sea of red and orange trees. The air was cool, the kind that makes your breath fog, and the silence was almost too perfect. No cars, no neighbors, just the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a crow. I unpacked my duffel bag, built a fire in the old stone fireplace, and settled in with a beer, feeling like I'd escaped the world. That first night was fine, just me reading by the fire, the wind picking up outside. But Saturday morning, something felt off. I stepped onto the porch to sip my coffee, and there it was, a circle of stones, maybe 10 feet across, right in the clearing in front of the cabin. It wasn't there when I arrived. The stones were old, moss-covered, arranged too neatly to be random, like someone had spent hours placing them. In the center was a pile of leaves, not scattered but stacked, almost like a cairn. I figured it was local kids, maybe a prank, but the nearest house was miles away, and I hadn't heard anyone out here. I kicked the leaves apart, scattered the stones, and went about my day, planning a hike up the ridge behind the cabin. The trail was overgrown, barely a path anymore, winding through pines and maples that blocked out the sun. About a mile in, I found something that made my skin crawl. A tree with a face carved into it. Not a crude sketch, but detailed. Hollow eyes, a gaping mouth like it was screaming. The bark around it was stained dark, almost black, like it had been burned or stained with something thick. I told myself it was just vandalism, but my gut was screaming to turn back. I kept going, snapping a picture with my phone, but when I checked it later, the image was gone, replaced with a blank screen, like it had never saved. By the time I got back to the cabin, the sun was setting, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and stretch across the clearing. The stones were back. Same circle, same pile of leaves in the center, like I hadn't touched them. My heart started pounding. I grabbed a stick and scattered them again, this time tossing the stones into the woods. But as I turned to go inside, I heard it, a low hum like a chant coming from the trees. It wasn't words, just a droning sound, rising and falling with the wind. I stood there, frozen, straining to pinpoint it. It stopped as suddenly as it started, leaving just the rustle of leaves. Inside, I locked the door, checked the windows and tried to laugh it off. Just the woods being creepy, I muttered, but my voice sounded hollow. I built up the fire, hoping the crackle would drown out my nerves. That's when I noticed the smell. Musty, like wet earth and decay, seeping through the walls. I checked the chimney, thinking something was caught, but it was clean. Then I saw it, a trail of dirt on the floor, leading from the front door to the fireplace. Not mud, but dry, powdery soil, like it had been tracked in deliberately. I swept it up, heart racing, and double-checked the locks. Around midnight, the humming started again, closer now, like it was right outside the cabin. I grabbed my flashlight and a crowbar from the tool shed, my hands shaking. I peeked through the window, and my breath caught. The stones were back again, the circle perfect. But this time, the leaves in the center were moving, swirling in a slow spiral, like they were caught in a wind I couldn't feel. And in the trees just beyond the clearing I saw shapes, shadows that didn't match the branches, shifting and swaying like they were watching me. I didn't sleep. I sat by the fire, crowbar in hand, listening as the humming grew louder, then faded, then came back. Around 3 a.m. it stopped, and a new sound took its place, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers on glass coming from the bedroom window. I crept down the hall, flashlight shaking, and pulled back the curtain. Nothing outside, just the dark woods. But when I turned away, I heard it, a whisper, clear as day, from inside the cabin. "You moved the stones." It wasn't my voice. It wasn't human. I bolted to the living room, grabbed my keys and ran for my truck. As I fumbled with the door, I saw it in the rear-view mirror, a figure standing in the clearing, right where the stone circle was. It was tall, too tall, its limbs bent at wrong angles, its face hidden in shadow, except for two glowing points where eyes should have been. The leaves around it swirled faster, rising into the air like a flock of birds. I floored the gas, tires spinning on gravel, and didn't stop until I hit the main road. I drove straight to a motel in the nearest town, shaking so bad I could barely check in. The next morning I called a local ranger, told him about the stones, the carving, the figure. He went quiet for a long moment before saying, "You're lucky you left." He told me about an old legend in those mountains, about a group of settlers who vanished in the 1800s. They'd built their homes on what locals called hallowed ground, a place the native tribes avoided. All that was found of them was a circle of stones and piles of leaves soaked in blood. The ranger said folks still see things out there, shadows, lights, faces in the trees. "Whatever's in those woods," he said, "it don't take kindly to visitors." I never went back to the cabin. I sold it sight unseen a few months later. But every fall, when the leaves turn, I find them, small piles of leaves on my doorstep, arranged in neat stacks, no matter where I live. And sometimes, late at night, I hear that hum, faint but unmistakable, like it's calling me back. If you're hiking in the mountains this fall, stick to the main trails. Some places don't want you there, and they'll make sure you know it.